Yes, you are absolutely right. I learned so much from you and also so much from CISNA as I took this journey into the big problem that I'm working on trying to solve, which is the capacity of the nonprofit sector, the Muslim nonprofit sector specifically, which is the focus of my work. Is sort of how to help Muslim nonprofits grow and be sustainable at the same time. And that's really where our work is and our expertise. And, grateful to CISNA for all of its work that it's doing. I think now more than ever, Islamic schools have to thrive. They just have to thrive, period. The work that you guys are doing, the work is really for the long game. And I think the argument, Islamic school versus public school is over with what's happening with policy around the US. And so I really hope and make dua, inshallah, that your Islamic schools really thrive and succeed, have all the resources that they need to develop a pipeline of Islamic value, academically driven leaders, inshallah. Today's conversation is a follow-up to the board retreat that took place and the CISNA retreat that took place, the training program that took place in Dallas. And so what we wanted to do first and foremost today was to touch base on that content. And then a survey went out. Some of you folks have responded to that and kind of gave some feedback on where you would like some additional guidance and help, and we'll be able to do that. The first question I want to ask, maybe from the group, and I'll put it in the box here, is have any of you tried any specific strategies or actions from the retreat, specifically when it comes to financial sustainability that we may have talked about last time? And are you care to share challenges or opportunities that you've been running into before we dig into some additional content for today or some focused content today? I'll open the floor up for a few minutes. See.
And I know that not everyone who joined was in Dallas, by the way, Tayyab. So just
Okay.
that.
Okay. So then we'll open it up widely. Are there challenges that you're facing? What would you say are some of the challenges that you're facing when it comes to sustainability, financial sustainability, fundraising, development, growth? What are some of your top 3 challenges? Any volunteers?
Yeah.
All right.
I have
Assalamu alaikum.
this. Alaikum salam.
I'm Anas Salkini, board chairman in Oklahoma City Mercy School. One of the issues that you touched upon at the retreat was diversifying the source of funding.
Yeah.
And subhanAllah, alhamdulillah, in Oklahoma, we have been blessed with the passing of the law. It's parental choice tax credit. That's something we, alhamdulillah, we jumped on as a private school to bring this to our school. That can help us with the extra funding. There's another tool of source of funding called the Oklahoma Islamic School Foundation that allows donors to donate to this grant authorizing organization that can give that to school. So the other thing, looking also for grants, applying for grants, and we found somebody who actually can pay to help us applying for grants. So alhamdulillah, with that we have been able to increase our budget sourcing.
MashaAllah, congratulations on that. And of course, you probably know my sister very well, Tahmina Jima, and her husband, Dr. Zahid Jima.
Subhanallah, mashallah, mashallah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
founders for the school, mashallah.
yeah, alhamdulillah. Yep, they're that's my brother and sister and my uncle
Mashallah.
there.
I didn't know
Dr.
that, mashallah, mashallah. We're blessed, alhamdulillah. We're blessed with them, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for sharing that. What I'm hearing you say is, you sort of have this opportunity where there's a state-funded program, and then now there's also this mechanism, of this sort of consolidated fund that is helping support potential grant resources to help the school. No, you're on the right track, and I even think that in some states, advocating for such programs where you don't have programs like you do in Oklahoma, like you do in Florida. I live in Florida. I'm in Orlando, Florida. In states where you don't have programs like we have in Florida, for example, I think investing, Islamic schools coming together, investing, and even working with CISNA. CISNA also, Sufia and CISNA, they work on advocacy programs and strategies, I think is a tactic to build more support and diversification for your organization. There was somebody else was raising their hand at the time. The question is, what are challenges that you're facing when it comes to growth and sustainability? And or if you were at the retreat in January, what were some tactics or strategies that you applied that's working to share with the group? And then Sister Sophia posted a question too. Schools are facing a challenge to pay teachers a salary comparable to what they can get at a public school. They are hesitant to raise tuition because families may not be able to afford the higher tuition. Yeah. So, and a couple of thumbs up on that too. What I would say there is, here's the playbook for this problem. Let me restate the problem. The business problem statement is, how do we increase teacher salaries for various reasons? We want to be equitable in what we offer our faculty, right? We want to be competitive and attractive for top talent. And those could be two of many big reasons why you'd want to solve this business problem, which is, how do we make sure that we've got the revenue and the funding to support that? And first and foremost, what I usually do is set up a forecast table. Donors will be willing to seed fund this growth plan if you have a plan. If you cry out for help, then your fundraising strategy is what we call, more of a guilt to give strategy rather than an intentional strategic approach. So that's part of it. I would say number one, have a strong case for support. Case for support means, why are we asking for the fund? Within that, build your forecast. And many Islamic schools are doing this now. They're basically building a forecast, which is, just down a spreadsheet. Here's all of our teachers that we have today. Here's what they're paid today, year one, and here's where we want to be year two. And here's how that compares to the top 3 private schools in the market and public schools in and around this area. Second is here's our growth table. Who are the teachers that we want to bring on over the years, and sort of show that homework. That forecast showcases to donors that we do our homework and have a plan for that. And then the ask around that to donors is seed funding. What do I mean by that? Because usually with the challenge for your faculty growth or comp plan growth strategy is, okay, how do we get the money now, and then how do we make sure the money stays? Those are 2 separate problems. You got to break those down into 2 buckets. First bucket is, how do we get the money now to make the move? Well, that's seed funding. How do we get the money over time? Well, now that's longer term financial strategy. That's either going to come from incremental increases in tuition and also incremental increases in fundraising. Then the question is okay, well, how do we deal with the market problem? What do you mean by the market problem, Brother Tayyib? What I mean is, like, is the market willing to pay the increase? Are they willing to absorb the increase? Oh, it's spelled wrong, sorry. Well, the answer to that is yes, if we educate the market on that. And the way you want to think about that is, and I don't have my whiteboard on me, but the way you want to think about that is that there's two markets. There's customer markets and donor markets. So when you're building your strategy, your fundraising strategy, your financial strategy for your nonprofit, you have to think there's a customer market here and there's a donor market here. Also, there's a beneficiary market, 3 markets. So Islamic schools have the 3 market problem: customer markets, donor markets, beneficiary markets. And as you think about these 3 markets, there's blending, of course, because you'll have some parents that are beneficiaries and customers and donors. And so you want to think of it as 3 bubbles. They're basically 3 bubbles: customer markets, donor markets, beneficiary markets. And as you're building your strategy, you're building your comms plans for these 4 areas. The 4 areas, one being the blended market. Let me see if I can get my, give me 1 minute, Sister Sophia. Let me see if I can get my iPad up and running. It's a very good question. Let's invest a couple of minutes on it. I'll be right back. 1 minute.
Okay. Does anyone want to share if they have other questions too that they'd like Tayyab to address after he finishes with this one? Please post them in the chat, or if you want to ask questions of each other, we've always found that that's very helpful, is getting talking to others in the room.
Yeah, I have one question. So this is the outside. I'm from UF, Universal Academy of Florida in Tampa. So I'm treasurer for the school. I wanted to ask a question about how the endowment comes into picture, play into whole sustainability equation. So how we strategize it, and how we educate our board members, and how do we get them on the board, and then how do we reach out to our donors, or the pools that Brother Taib is talking about, all the pool market, 4 markets, and then how to how to execute it in a long run, so that we can become one of those the top-notch schools that we don't need to depend on other funds to run the school. So that's my question.
Yeah.
May I share our school's experience regarding that
Please.
subject? So so I think what helped us as a school, so I came to the school board about 4 years ago and became a chairman about a year ago. And what helped us to address that is to change the mindset. So the mindset when we were sitting at budget meetings in the past was just how we can cover our current operations without the mindset of growth, without the mindset of capital improvement that Brother Tayyib have touched up on last meeting. And subhanAllah, like capital improvement, meaning like, remodeling, expansion, make facilities available to students, soccer, basketball, volleyball, all those are essential for our athletic program that we just started, subhanAllah. Also, it's a new thing. Some people looked at athletic program as an extra thing that's not necessary, but we made it, no, it's an essential thing for our students. And it's, alhamdulillah, was approved by a lot of community members and students, and they loved it, all loved it, and they all came on board when they saw the benefits of it. And subhanAllah, we increased our tuition from 7,000 to 14,000, but we made it available in an accessible still by applying those grants that we talked about, and that's what the Christian schools do. They they have high tuition, and they apply then scholarships and grants, and you end up making still those who can't pay, you can still give them the discount, so they can benefit from the discounted tuition. Those who have grants, you can still apply those grants to the tuition that you have. Like in subhanallah, in Tamba, they do have the tax credit. You know, if our school kept the tuition at 7,000, they can't use the 9,000 tax credit that Tamba gives to every student. So you have to increase the tuition to apply those grants and tax credits and scholarships.
Jazakallah khair for sharing that. And we're up and running on my iPad now. So one key image that's important when we're talking about funding and sustainability is, you have to think about markets. Even in my doctorate work, what I'm finding is that most nonprofits are so focused on mission impact that we don't always think about market impact. Like, what do the markets actually care about? In the for-profit world, you always start with the market. You always say, what are customer needs? What are they willing to pay for? What problems do they have that we can solve, that creates value that they're going to pay for? In the nonprofit world, we get right to mission impact. But the market impact question has to exist with it. So the way I want you to think about this and have this image in your mind is you want to think about sort of these three bubbles. I'm trying to draw it nicely. No, it's not as perfect. How about this? And there's going to be this overlap right here. And so this top part here, let's say that's donor markets. These are people in this top section here that are gonna donate, but they don't have any children in the school. So let's say this is parents, and parents are customers. Actually, let me break this down and say customers. And let's break this down and say beneficiaries. Customers, these are purely parents, that you're serving. And beneficiaries, those are parents. These are paying customers. And then beneficiaries are students and also parents who might not be paying or might be fully on tuition assistance or scholarship assistance. So the overlap here might be a parent who's a donor plus a customer plus a beneficiary. So if I'm donating some, but I'm also on financial assistance and I'm a parent, then I'm in this center bubble. That's the overlap of all three. But if I'm a parent and I'm not paying, I'm 100% tuition or whatever, then I'm a beneficiary. I'm purely a beneficiary. I'm neither donating nor paying. But if I'm paying and donating, then I'm a customer and a donor. So that's kind of these different overlaps. Without spending too much time on that, I hope you can see that. But what's important to see here and understand here is that these are the different markets that you need, a financial plan and a marketing plan for, because now you have tuition and donation and financial assistance. You have three quadrants of how someone might give. And then if we really wanted to be complex here, you can also add government, right? So those are your grants and foundations. So your grants and foundations might be a bubble in this donor category. But it's important to map out these markets, because then you can create a plan for customers, a plan for beneficiaries, and a plan for donors. If all we're doing is creating the same plan for everyone, then we're likely only reaching one market. If we're creating one plan for everyone, then we're likely only reaching one market. And therefore, we're not creating market impact, total market impact. So just keep that in mind. It's a fundamental marketing principle, is peel out the different markets you serve, peel out the different paying markets, non-paying markets, donating markets, whatever those markets are, peel it out so you can see it clearly, and then build a plan for that market. I want to speak about this endowment piece for just a second. So 100% we can all agree that endowments are absolutely necessary for educational institutions. They're part of sustainability, and they have to be part of your comprehensive, what we talked about at the retreat, your comprehensive capital campaign strategy, your capital strategy. Your comprehensive capital strategy. Your comprehensive capital strategy basically says, okay, what are our income streams? And how do we cover, what are those income streams going to cover? So we might have, you list all your, you might have tuition is an income stream. You might have grants as an income stream. You might have bake sales, right? You might have ticket sales. Those are called earned income.
And you have cafeteria too.
Yep. So that might be under your earned income. Great example. Thank you for sharing that. And then donations, of course, right? And then, you might have your endowment. Your endowment is out here. Your endowment is out here. It's basically a future revenue stream, right? It's eventually going to need to fund to generate income for ops for some reason. And that's how you want to think about your endowment campaign. And then you have to think about a revenue strategy for your endowment here. That endowment's going to have its own revenue stream, and then this endowment is going to need its own investment strategy. How are we taking revenue, putting it into this endowment, and then at what time horizon, that's a clock, does this benefit what on the books of the school? Comprehensive capital campaign. Now, of course, this is not all inclusive. Your brains are probably now thinking about your P&L, or chart of accounts. Like every board member, every principal, you should know your organization's chart of accounts in your head. Chart of accounts. Chart of accounts says, how are we structured in terms of income, expenses, liabilities, assets? That's your chart of accounts. Every board member, every principal, you should know the chart of accounts in your head. Why? Because that informs strategy as you're out making day-to-day decisions. When you're in board meetings, when you're running the boat, you're thinking chart of accounts, it's all tied. So now your endowment strategy here. Now, when we're talking about revenue for your endowment, it's likely going to be, you see this donations? When we talk about donations, they're donors that are going to give to your donation. Sorry about my ugly drawing. So this is Joe Donor. Joe Donor, you know, really,
This is Abdullah.
it's Abdullah, yeah. Abdullah, Mariam, you know, they're donors, right? And they care about supporting. So they're going to donate. The mistake that organizations make with their endowment is they launch it prematurely. What does that mean? What that means is that, well, you've only got a couple hundred donors or 500 donors, and then because we have a hard time fundraising, we're like, man, fundraising's not working. Let's go start an endowment. And then they start redirecting this money to their endowment. Well, the problem with that is if you redirect to the endowment, you know, prematurely, then you cut off this line item on your chart of accounts. That's why at board members and principals, you got to know your chart of accounts, because when you're out making decisions, you got to see the impact to the chart of accounts. You know, what I'm highlighting to you is keep in mind this image that I lost my black. Here it is. Okay. That, you know, this is, so there's certain markets, right? So this is tuition. Tuition is going to be customers. You know, grants might be also a type of customer, which is a foundation or corporate philanthropy, right? Earned income is also a type of customer, right? A consumer. And then you have Abdullah, who's your donor right here. And Abdullah right now is donating, and that's helping your chart of accounts on your donation line. But then you launch your endowment, and you have to keep in mind that Abdullah is also going to have to donate to this endowment. So when we launch our endowment, we have to understand and plan for the impact the launch of the endowment is going to make on the donations. So if you pause recording real quick, and I'll give a real thank you for being quick with the recorder. But similarly for your Islamic school, you know, you have to think chart of accounts, you have to think markets, you have to think about you know, how do I move the market potential, the market opportunity, the market value to the different areas. And the other thing I would say, and this is, you know, a longer conversation, is, you know, the best financial strategists at organizations, they know how they're routing each of these income buckets to solve expense problems. You know, in startup, and when you're starving for resources, you put all your income into a bucket, and then every month you're using all your income to solve all your cash problems. That happens in startup, but eventually you want to get out of that. Eventually you want to get strategic with your revenue streams and your expense needs, right? So, and one easy way to start, of course, is your capital expenditures, right? So you have to figure out, okay, and that's something that you have to think about is, well, usually when people start Islamic schools, you know, it's any cash flow is fine. We just need cash, and nothing's wrong with that. You know, but at some point you have to move out of that mindset and be intentional about your tuition. So with nonprofit startup and Islamic school startup, you know, we just look at we set tuition based to solve a cash flow problem. And this mindset usually results in any cash is good cash. And this is the typical startup mindset. Well, what can they afford to pay? $100, fine. $100 is better than zero. And you're always in a cash flow, any cash is good cash mindset in setting tuition. And also in sort of this beneficiary mindset, well, we just need to help all the kids, so let's just do it. It's mission. It's about the mission. So, but in the long run, you got to shift out of that. Otherwise, you're stuck in startup. You're stuck in startup. So to get out of that startup mindset is now we need to shift from saying, okay, tuition is about cash flow, and tuition is about solving some sort of expense problem. Tuition is about solving. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I have one question. Basically, let's say we got out of the cash flow problem because of the because of the lifespan of the school. We got out of this cash flow problems and all those things, and we have the good structure on how the money flows and all those cash flow, and you have different buckets and all those things, and then suddenly you have a need for growth, and then you need a lot of money. So I'm looking for something where you suddenly hit with a growth strategy because you need to grow because you're running out of space or whatever the issues, and then on one side you're trying to sustain the quality of the school, and then on the other hand you are cash trapped, and then you need a lot of cash to grow because you need to expand it. And this is the and during this period, so how we maintain all of these, I think that's the strategy I want in light of endowment kind of thing. So basically uh, someone needs to think that, okay, if we take out all the cash for the growth, then we'll have problems in sustaining kind of thing. So though I think if you can just address a little bit, highlight on all these things, we can the strategies to do parallel so that we can sustain the growth and quality and everything. So I think that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And the first thing I would do is I would map income and assets to expense strategy. You need a financial strategy. And there's blind spots here, so I'm just kind of working with the information that I have. But what do I mean by that is I'm gonna probably say, okay, what's our OpEx and what's our CapEx? These are two important numbers in that algorithm that I'm hearing you say. What I'm hearing you say is we've got an ongoing OpEx, which is how do we run the organizations? And then we've got this big need to expand the school, so that's the CapEx. That's happening either now or in the future. It's that event is taking place now. That financial event is taking place now, or that financial event is taking place later. We have a CapEx event happening that we need to plan and prepare for. OpEx is happening ongoing. So you sort of need to start with, okay, what are these numbers? And the other part to OpEx, which is a complexity, is what's our number now and how is this number growing? And then what's this number? Okay. And then how does this number help this in the future? Because you might need $1 million now to add another building that's going to add another 100 students. And then the impact of that 100 students is it actually helps our OpEx grow. So this CapEx is a potential investment. The other element to this equation is what might be your asset expense you might need to make. Asset expense means, for example, just recently, in the last 6 months, I'm working with a masjid, okay? This masjid said, Brother Tayyab, we need to raise, it was $3 million, $3 million to buy an additional land, 12 acres of land. And our plan is to use that land for future activities. And in every Eid, we're going to put a tent there and do Eid there. We just need space for Eid. Okay. And family activities, et cetera, et cetera. Parking lot's getting too slow. So they needed $3 million for that. They had $3 million in their assets. They had $3 million sitting there. And so the plan was, we're going to spend the $3 million. We're going to buy it, CapEx. It's a capital expense to buy the land. And then we're going to fundraise to restore. Let me go to donors. We're going to go back and we're going to fundraise to restore the $3 million asset that's in the bank. And we're going to do a lot of that by showing value. So in other words, that's why knowing your chart of accounts, knowing your financial position is important and critical for a mature organization. It sounds like yours might be when you're planning this and seeing that strategy. The mistake that I see often is, hey, we need to buy this $3 million land. Let's just go start fundraising. Let's put signs up. Let's start begging people at Jummah. Let's start begging people at Tarawih. And eventually donors are like, don't we have $3 million sitting in the savings? Why aren't we using that? And you end up with pushback and all the other types of problems. So just to summarize, OpEx, CapEx, and asset expense, if you have an asset, leveraging these three items in a way, looking at your OpEx today, what's the impact for your OpEx tomorrow once this CapEx is realized and the building is done? And telling the story. Most importantly, tell the whole story to donors. If you tell the whole story to donors, or customers and beneficiaries, they'll be bought in. So tell the whole story to your markets. Why? Because when you do that, you get buy-in. And that's what you want. You want buy-in. You don't want to just sell it. You want complete buy-in of all your markets on whatever your strategy might be. Was that helpful, my brother?
Yeah, it's really good. So you have, so let's say you have assets, and then you need to define that asset amount that you have, and then try to collect it back fully or more or little, but you need to maintain that asset you have to. So what kind of asset is it? A reserved, or is it endowment asset, or what? The one you have the left box on asset expense.
Yeah.
So that is a reserve fund or your endowment fund.
Yeah, and I mean, your board and your financial advisors are going to help you there. But the way you think about assets is simpler, right? You've got your short term, and you've got your long term, and then you've got. If I were to make a quadrant, you're saying it's liquid. You could liquidate it, or you can't liquidate it, right? And that's how you want to think about your assets strategy. Short, long, liquid, or not able to liquid that asset. In the Mashhad example that I gave you, they had $3 million in a checking account because they had no policy that governed what to do with the money, and when you don't have good governance policy, then the organization is at the subjectivity of the individuals running it. When you don't have governance policy, the organization is at the mercy of whoever's in power, whether that's the board, whether that's donors, whether that's other silos of power. So in order to do what I'm describing here, like literally the first step, is you just got to have good governance in place. Very hard to pull this off if you don't have good governance. And if you don't have good governance, then hopefully there's an Amir or an Amira somewhere, a strong board chair that can drive the organization into the future state. But if I were to just give you some examples, there's good institutions financial institutions out there like Amana Mutual Funds, North American Islamic Trust, Azad, Sharia Portfolio. There's so many now. Like, I don't know all of them. Forgive me if I didn't say one that you know. But there's so many of these now, Sharia compliant financial institutions. I am neither endorsing nor promoting any of them. I'm just saying do your homework, and you might find one that aligns with your organization's values and your board's values. Something very creative that my team and I are doing right now is we're helping a very financially conservative, Islamically conservative organization with a real estate strategy. It's basically they had a few $1 million, and we're buying micro real estate rental property around Florida. And it's outsourced to a management agency that's managing the whole rental property, and then the returns going back to the organization. So I just share those two case examples to open your mind up.
Right.
I just want
Yeah.
to open your mind
Thank
up. Yeah.
Can I? Tayyab, if you don't mind, I'd like to also add one thing that was part of this question, which I realized was an organization that the question was talking about when you do growth, you might be taking funds away from keeping the school running. I think that's many organizations are in that struggle where they're outside of fundraising, they can't survive because they need fundraising to keep OpEx working. And I think our organization, like 5-6 years ago, some of the brothers got together, made some difficult choices, and came up with a tuition increase strategy to the point where our donations don't go towards OpEx at all. I think there's only one segment, like the middle school, where there's a specific middle school targeted fundraiser to middle school parents. But overall, fundraising doesn't affect OpEx. And that actually has liberated us because everything, like our messaging becomes so simple to donors. You're donating for growth. And we don't ever have this question of saying, oh, we're going to take money away from OpEx to do growth. So it's very liberating, but it requires deliberate planning, thought, making some hard decisions, and you'll see the effects within a few years of doing that.
Can I ask a quick question all regarding to this? So within this, this is Mamoon Rashid. I'm one of the board members over here in Oklahoma. So you mentioned the donors, the donor customers, donor beneficiaries, and then we talked about surgically kind of targeting them separately. I'll make a quick point. So there are donors which are donating no matter what, whether they change in the school or not, or they are just donating. They want to give the money for the cause of Allah. Then there are customers who are ready to pay, but they are only like they're ready to pay their fee, but they're not ready to increase. But they have the ability to increase pay. They can pay, but they are not just paying. And then there are beneficiaries who are just like they need support to stay in the school. So how do you surgically kind of because these customers who are paying and who can pay more, these are the ones you basically, because you cannot just get all the donors to donate so much that they can reach a private school level. You have to have the donors donating, but the customers have to really increase their push, and the beneficiaries may have to break a little bit of back too in order to really get the standards of the school high. How do you kind of address all these in that you're able to get that from them?
Yeah. First of all, I'm a big advocate for we're talking about having an independent, separate, what's called financial assistance program, and have a separate scholarship program. and have a standard tuition. Okay. Now, some of you might say, well, we do have that. And that's probably true, but where things will differ is in the implementation. What do I mean by this? What I find is when I'm working with Islamic schools, they'll have, hey, this is our tuition, but then we have a standard family discount. And then, you know, people who can't afford it, they fill out a form, and then we give them, you know, reduced or free tuition. Okay, sounds cool. How do you implement that? They give it to the secretary, they fill it out on the form, and we don't really deny anything. We don't really check into anything. Well, what happens then? Well, when you have a process like that, then you leave room for unintentional abuse, and you end up with very serious consequences to your financial strategy. Well, what's the prescription for this problem? The prescription for this problem is, how do we operationalize a better financial assistance program? There should be an independent review and an independent body and a standard process that's public and followed, because that's part of your problem that Islamic schools have, is you have these 5 or 6 families that are paying full freight. I'm emphasizing, exaggerating to make a point. And of course, this is not true for all schools, but you have a few folks that are paying full freight and donating full freight. And in the back of their minds, it always exists. Hey, you know, we're supporting the school and that's great, alhamdulillah. But man, I really wish other people would support. And then sometimes donor abuse happens. Those donors eventually like, man, we're not doing this anymore. You guys need to do something about your financial program. So this is how you get ahead of that problem is, number one, your financial assistance program, you should have good governance. This is good governance. And that means an independent body, and you have a standard that's public and that's followed by everyone and implemented. Scholarship program, what I like about the scholarship program is, look, we're building these Islamic schools because we need leaders too, right? Ultimately, like, for me, when I'm out there and I'm advocating for Islamic schools, I'm really advocating because the Islamic schools ultimately should be creating the leaders, because, you know, there's 300-400 Islamic schools, and it's costing millions of dollars. And we've got 8 million, according to Dr. Bagby, Muslims in America. While these Islamic schools are never going to cover the whole population, therefore they need to be creating leaders. So, you know, and if that's the case, then we need to be attracting and recruiting leaders, which means it's not just the smartest kids, but the academically driven, Islamically inspired, value-based leaders who eventually go on to become the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, who become president of the United States, who become chief justices in the Supreme Court, who become elected officials in policy and economic power, political power for the American Muslim community, for all of humanity. That's why Islamic schools need to exist. And that has to be articulated, and that has to be built into your financial structure and your organizational strategy. So the scholarship program needs to literally say, we're looking to who have academic Islamic merit. This too needs governance policy, because you might have somebody who's super smart, academically driven, and who needs financial assistance, but you're able to solve that problem by putting them in the scholarship program. Because part of Islam, we know, is also, when we give, we want to make sure that we're not making that family feel like they need all the help, right? We want to lift them out of the assistance that they need. So a scholarship program similarly should have, you know, a body and a governing policy. I would also encourage all of you guys to contact a continuous charity. They were at the CISNA conference. If you talk to them and say, hey, we're going to set up a program with you, a 0% interest loan program. Now, all of a sudden, you're endowing your financial assistance program. You can tell families, look, You know, you can get a loan from ACC, but you're going to have to pay it back because it helps all the other students. You know, now all of a sudden your financial assistance program eventually over 3 to 5 to 10 years, you know, becomes fully sustainable. You could route your donors into setting up a fund at ACC. Now all of a sudden, eventually down the road, you won't even need a financial assistance program that's funded by donors anymore. And then third and last is your tuition program. You know, then here you don't do discounts anymore. This is full freight every single time. You know, this is our tuition. It costs $25,000 a year to do what you're asking us to do. You're asking us to take your child and put them in a machine that's going to, inshallah, empower them to become leaders. We can't do that for free. So now we have these other mechanisms to help support families who need help, to support students that are thriving and driving down that road and need some help and deserve it. But our tuition is $25,000. It's just what it takes. This right here sends also a marketing message to the community. It sends a marketing message to your customers. It sends a marketing message to your parents. It sends a marketing message, you know, to your donors that we're serious about our mission. And these are our mechanisms to solve that problem. Was that helpful?
Yes, yes. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there was an Islamic school that we were working with. And, you know, the majority of the students in that school were refugee kids, and very few did not need, super few did not need financial assistance. Ultimately, we told the board, let's pivot on strategy. Let's actually say this school exists for this incoming population. And when we did that, the donors responded big time, because the other problem Islamic schools face when you're going to the wider donor community, here's I'll draw another framework for you when we're talking about strictly donors. This donor, remember, people give to causes that they value. They have to really care about something to donate to it. And if your value proposition is hey, donate to our school so we can educate all these other kids, this donor is thinking, why don't those parents and families support your school that are benefiting from your school, right? So this value proposition has to connect to this donor audience who's not a parent and who's not a customer. Sorry, a customer and a beneficiary. This should say customer, beneficiary. So if they're not a beneficiary and they're not a customer, then what's the value proposition? And again, this goes back to what I said earlier. If you have one value proposition and you're sending that one value proposition to all your audiences, you're excluding this donor who's neither a beneficiary nor a customer. So if you want to attract this donor who's neither a beneficiary nor a customer, then you have to ask, what is our value proposition? In the nonprofit world, it's called case for support. In the for-profit world, it's called value proposition. So what is your value proposition for this donor? Now, in the case example of the Islamic school that we looked at and said, hey, you're really a charitable organization. You're really a nonprofit, purely charitable organization, you know, and you're serving a very specific beneficiary community. Let's pivot on the value proposition. Let's go to market. Let's donor markets and fundraise, and then they raise the money. But if that's not your target market, then you need a different value proposition. What is your value proposition? I would argue that Islamic schools really need to shift their value proposition and say, we are truly developing leaders to become elected officials, to become president of the United States and other countries, to become chief justices, to become CEOs of and in the C-suite where economic power exists. That value proposition will speak to a wider donor audience. And if you guys remember from class, there's something called a constituency map. A constituency map is where you're likely speaking only to the people that are closest to the inner network of your organization. And these donors, this guy or gal, they're out here. They're not experiencing the value of your organization. They don't know the value of your organization. They think your organization only exists to help these people. You're in a bubble, you're helping people in a bubble, you're not helping the rest of the world. So why should I donate to you? I got other causes that really are making the world a better place beyond you and your bubble. And so you have to figure out how to say, no, this bubble eventually is going to benefit everyone. It's going to eventually make the whole world better. And that's why we need you to support this capital campaign. That's why we need you to support this strategy to increase teacher capacity, this strategy to increase student capacity, this strategy to whatever. That's why we need you to support our organization. I hope that was helpful from a fundraising and messaging and market standpoint.
Brother, my name is Waleed Shakir. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Kiva, brother. In relation to this, like this topic here, creating a prospect for donors, how do you deal with donor fatigue? Because I see that's become a problem in several markets, not just our markets in Oklahoma. I'm referencing several, even larger states like Texas, where Islamic schools are reliant on donors, right, to come up with exactly what you're talking about, right, to help these Islamic academies produce leaders for the future, but the donors are not coming through like they did in the past. What are your suggestions about that? Should Islamic schools start looking at like a omni-channels, look at different paths of getting funding? Like, I know you mentioned like a refugee student. You know, should schools look at possibly getting other channels of funding to cover the refugee? You know, I just want to see your thoughts about it. What should we be looking at? Because I hate to say that we should be, of course, receiving donations, but shouldn't the schools also be looking at different channels of funding as well to help them be successful?
Yeah.
So, Brother, if you could I share our experience? Because we just went through our fundraiser, and our fundraiser was 2 weeks after your talk at CISNA, and we just in those 2 weeks we tried to implement your guidance around, like, you know, there is no donor fatigue, but what's missing is donor engagement, donor appreciation. And we just followed your tips on, you know, first what we did was we looked at our past history of, and embarrassingly, we had never done that. We're all like data folks, but we had never done that for our own organization, where we looked at the past donors, put them in a table, figured out who are the sustained donors, who are increasing donors. We figured out pitches for them. We started reaching out, and then we had like a dinner in our house. We invited the donors, and we invited them to invite, you know, 1 or 2 other donors. And what you said is true. There is no donor fatigue. What we have is, donor abuse. And subhanAllah, the pitch that you gave is figure out your GFR table. Like, so for our goal was 1.5. We figured out we need a few 75s and down from there. We actually shared in that meeting, before we shared numbers, we kind of opened up our past success, like our growth, like how we have been investing for the last few years, the trajectory of where our funds are going, and then the challenge of where we need to go. And when we actually took input from them, like you mentioned, we need to make them part of the decision-making process. So we let them give us inputs, even on our pitch, and it was very useful, because when they saw our pitch, certain things in our pitch was very confusing. And so some of them said, you know, you need to frame it this way, like, because they're also board members of other organizations. So once we got that feedback, and it was a back and forth, they felt valued, because it was not, I think being in the home also made a difference versus being in some random, you know, venue. But then when we made the JFR pitch with the numbers at the end, we never showed a slide, because our um, like we didn't have space for a projector kind of thing, but we just shared the GFR, some of the numbers. We seeded the numbers in their head. And subhanAllah, the next day in the morning, like before this, our top fundraising contribution would have been around 25 to 30, like ever. The next morning, I get a text from one of those who attended. It was a sister, and she goes, "I'm willing to pitch in 100K," right? And that story, and this was someone who, as you suggested, why did we find these people? Because they were consistently giving us money, but it was at a certain level, right? And you said that's a sign that they can probably go higher, right? You just have to reach out to them. And so this one person's story, then once we shared anonymously, then more of these consistent donors came in, and they're like, oh, I'm going to match that. I'm going to match that. And somebody actually, husband and wife, said, we're going to individually match. So they matched, like they became 200. And that, and we just did one, like this was like it was one dinner, right? And then reaching out one-on-one. But I think that donor engagement, targeting the donors, and polishing the message, helping them polish our message. And on the fundraiser, I heard that what made a difference was seeing our slides reflect their feedback was huge. Because until then, most organizations, what they had experienced in our area, they just want money from you, but they don't want any ideas from you. And so I think breaking that cycle, listening to them really makes a difference. And one of these donors actually reached out to say, hey, if you want a long-term loan, like $500,000, I'm willing to do that for you. And so I think just following the things you have said, I'll give you the floor now, but that was instrumental for us.
No, Jazakallah khair, brother Bassel. Mashallah, you made my Eid, man. You made my Eid. As a teacher and an educator myself, like, you do the research, you create the materials, and you pour your heart out in front of the class, and then you're just hoping some students run with it. Mashallah, you made my day. May Allah bless you. May Allah bless your school. And thank you so much for sharing that story. Because I can say it, but unless someone tells a story of how it worked, it just doesn't stick. So may Allah bless you and your school and your board. Thank you for sharing that story. Sister Sufia, over to you. I think we're towards the end here, so I'll hand the floor back over to you, and tee me up if you need me for anything else.
Yes, so actually I wanted to just share not a similar story, but just to supporting evidence for what you have taught us and what Brother Bassel used. And what I just want to say is that my mother is a prime example of someone like that kind of donor. She'll donate to anybody who sends her a postage stamp, envelope with a stamp already on it, a little cute something. And she's like, well, they must have spent some money to mail this to me, so I'm going to send them at least $10. And she will send, I do her taxes for her, she will send, 50 different organizations, $10, $20, this and that. And then a few she'll send large amounts to, because the mission resonates with her more than just a message. But she's the kind of person, if someone actually call her and talk to her and tell her about the work they do, she could be a larger donor. So Brother Bassel, thank you for sharing that. And, Brother Tayyab, sharing your ideas with us. It really is a matter of just taking something that Brother Tayyab has shared with us today. Even if you take one thing, just one thing, and apply it, you'll see that these things really work. Because as Brother Tayyab has said, there's been a lot of research, a lot of work that's gone behind. There's something to it. He's not just talking. He's coming from somewhere. He's coming from a place of knowledge and experience. So I do tell all of you who are here and those who are going to be listening to the recording later, take some of this stuff, reach out to us if you need anything more, if you need clarification on anything, if you need any other resources, if you missed out on anything Brother Tayyab shared with us. And it will work, inshallah, because you know what? And I know we didn't talk enough about it, about my favorite subject, which is aligning everything to mission. This was clearly about a particular topic, but everything is aligned to mission. You can't be financially stable. You can't have financial stability and sustainability if you don't have a strong mission that everybody buys into and that you align all your programs with. So keeping that in mind, again, it's like intentions, right? It begins there with the intentions. So I'm gonna, if you have time for maybe there's 5 minutes left. If anyone has a burning question, please go ahead. Otherwise, happy day of Arafah, Eid Mubarak to everyone. And go
I
ahead.
have one question, which is what's the acceptable percentage of expense ratio on donor engagement? Because even after a successful fundraiser, I found that most of our board doesn't want any donor engagement funds to be coming from the organization. It all has to be fi sabilillah from a board member, and that's not sustainable long term. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Jazakallah khair for asking that question. The bigger, broader answer is it depends. So and the reason why the research says it depends is because let's say we're actively we want to grow the organization. Well, you might need to invest more in donor development. You got to invest to acquire new donors. For example, in Ramadan this year, I had one organization where we had a 5x target for fundraising expenditure. And another organization we had a 2x target. And now the board member in organization B said, why are we only having a 2x target? Because, this other organization I work with, they're at 5x and 10x. And the answer to that question is, well, we're acquiring new donors, and it costs more to acquire a new donor than it does to retain a donor or recover a donor. So in other words, what I want to land in your minds is, what you're going to spend on fundraising and development is going to depend on your acquisition and retention priorities. So most everybody here is a board member. So when you're having that meeting about development, ask the question, what's our priority here? Is it acquisition or is it retention? And if you haven't done development before, then you have a third dimension here, which is recoupment. So acquisition, retention, recoupment. These are three different types of levers in how you're going to drive your fundraising and development forward. What I usually tell an organization, depending on its size, donor development, can be anywhere from 7 to 11%. Again, I'm just ballparking here. And the reason why I say 7 to 11% is because you're going to spend 2 to 3% just on transactions, right? Your credit card processing is 2 to 3%, 4%, 5%, your platform fees. So then now you need your human resource investment. So your human resource investment is the other half of that, which covers the people that are going to do the outreach. But absolutely not should a can you guys hear Siri talk? Oh, that's my phone. So absolutely not would I say that there should be no development staff. If there's no development staff in your organization, then you actually haven't taken development serious yet. And you're still in a charity mindset, no matter how long you've been around, no matter how much money you're raising. I would definitely invest in at least one full-time development staff. And that can be a fundraising manager or a development manager who then organizes and manages the board's work, the volunteers' work, the team's work, the staff's work. We put the whole fundraising responsibility on the principal. And this poor brother or sister, I feel bad for them. You're asking them to go direct to school, and then also go to these 7 p.m. meetings and 12 p.m. meetings on a Saturday and a Sunday. It's an injustice. It's an injustice, to human beings. And if you pause recording, I'll say something, Sophia, real quick, because
Jazakallah.
so we're at 10:46. This was
Yeah,
Sophia. Back
thank
over to
you.
you.
Very quick question. You mentioned the OPEX and the CAPEX. So again, I mentioned is it okay to combine both in budget, or make just like you make your budget just for the OpEx and you say, okay, all donors, all donations will go to the CapEx?
Well, in the words of my finance professor, you know, accounting is a science, finance is an art. And the reason why finance is an art is because it's tied to strategy. So now to the specific question, is it okay to do this or that? The answer is it depends on the organization. If I'm in startup mode, I'm probably heavily dependent upon cash flow, and then I'm dealing with cash management. I'm moving cash to keep everything flowing. If I'm later in the organization's life cycle, then I would definitely recommend, you know, your CapEx and your capital campaign operations, your capital campaign strategy, your capital campaign management is treated with a unique approach than your sort of program. Your program is is education. Education's your program. Your facility is where you're doing your program, right? So for me, like when I set up Islamic school financial systems, I think of, you know, tuition, teacher salary, educational materials, supplies, et cetera, as my program expense. Then I treat my facility expenses separately, and then I treat also my you know, my capital income and capital expenses separately as well. Why do I do that differently? Well, with Islamic schools, you're always needing to buy new computers. You're always needing to improve the lab. You're always needing to do these capital improvements rather than these massive capital expenses, which is like expanding the building, buying property, et cetera, et cetera. So strategy is tied closely here, my brother. So, you know, and where the organization is in its life cycle is how you plan that out. I know I didn't give you a straight answer, but there really isn't a straight answer to that one, other than a really good financial planner can help you out and go a long way, inshallah. And a wizard with Excel.
Thank you, Brother Tayyab. If I could ask you to please make the closing dua for us.
Absolutely. So I'll say a few things in English, and then we'll do Surah Asr, because Surah Asr is the closing dua for all of us. First and foremost, make dua for all the leaders and founders and the institutional builders who established CISNA, who dreamed of Islamic schools in America, and who went out and did the work to lay the first bricks for all these Islamic schools, who were dreaming about us and our children to become leaders, to hold on to the faith. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them a long life, who are still living today, and give them a peaceful place in the akhirah. And on their journey to the akhirah, who are not here today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give our children the tawfiq, give them the strong identity in Islam, and help them become leaders. Make them dream of being employers and not employees. Make them dream of being elected officials and not just, you know, citizens and voters. And make them be the CEOs and at the center of economic power to drive value-based decisions for all of humanity, as was exemplified by our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help all of our teachers and staff and board members and parents and students who are in this Islamic school ecosystem today. Give them, increase their risk, give them peaceful sleep every single night, and make their life as trouble-free as possible. And again, I'd also make a dua for all those who are suffering around the world, our brothers and sisters in Palestine, our brothers and sisters in Sudan, our brothers and sisters in Rohingya, in India, anywhere, everywhere in the world, right here in the United States, where discrimination is increasing quite a bit. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of them. And with that, I'll close with Surah Asr. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Your brother Tayyab here, signing off. Thank you for making the world a better place, because that's good for you, that's good for me, and that's good for everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
جزاك الله
وعليكم السلام
السلام
جزاكم الله
عليكم
خير.
السلام عليكم